How did how did you become a diplomat? What's your background like? Over to you, Katherine.
Okay, thank you. And good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be here and to speak with you all. Since you all don't have my bio, I'll just give it to you orally. And I'll just tell you about myself. And then at the end, if you have any questions about me, please feel free to ask. So, my name is Katherine Stewart. I am a United States diplomat. Um, right now, I work at the US Embassy in Abuja. And just to give an overview of my background, so I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. Um, my parents are from Jamaica, and so they immigrated over to the United States. They started out in Minnesota, which is one of the northern states, and then we moved down to Iowa, and then finally down to Georgia, Atlanta specifically. Um, and I take a lot of pride in my Jamaican heritage. Both my parents spent most of their adult lives in Jamaica before moving over to the US. And my father, he went to graduate school in Kansas, which is another state in the Midwest. And he just became enamored with American culture. And so he decided to take up a job opportunity in the US. And that's when he went back to Jamaica to marry my mom. And then shortly after, both of them came over. So I had a good 18 years in Atlanta, but then after I graduated from high school, I traveled to Chicago. So I attended the University of Chicago for 4 years, and that was also a very wonderful experience. I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with the winters in Chicago, but it's as bad as they say. I hear people say that it gets really cold in Joss, that you even get some snow, but I
That's
think
correct.
Chicago would definitely take the cake for being extremely cold. Um, so when I was at the University of Chicago, I studied anthropology, and I had just a keen interest in the world. Knowing that my parents were from Jamaica, which is another former British colony, I wanted to learn more about my particular place in the world, not only as a daughter of Jamaican immigrants, but also as a Black American. So when I was there, I spent some time um, learning more about the people around me, which is how I came to study anthropology. I studied abroad in India, and so I was in Pune, India, for a few months, which is Pune is a bit south of Mumbai, and being another former British colony, I was very interested in making the connections between how India came to be versus how Jamaica came to be post-colonialism. Um, and so when I was in college, I actually was a rower. So I rowed competitively, and I was also a violist in my university symphony. Um, and I'm not sure if violas are common here in Nigeria, but it's another stringed instrument. It's a little larger than the violin, and it has a more mellow tone. And I played that for 15 years. And after I graduated from college, I gave up everything to go move to India to teach English. And so this is all to say that I've always been interested in traveling overseas, and especially places that have a connection with colonialism. I think that was something that really interested me from a young age. And I'm really glad I did that. So after spending a few months in India teaching, I went to graduate school in London. So I went to the School of African or Oriental and African Studies, also known as SOAS, part of the University of London system. And there I studied international studies and diplomacy with a specific focus on South Asia and South Asian politics. That was also a very uh, beneficial experience because there I worked with members of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. so their version of diplomats, the British version of diplomats. Um, and I learned a lot about tradecraft, right? So what it's like to interact with other countries and work in line with other countries' interests as an American. Um, and shortly after that, um, actually, I joined the State Department. So there is a program called the Consular Fellows Program, and it is similar to a career in the State Department, but uh, it's not as formal. And so you would essentially be doing the same job as a career diplomat, except I would be focused only on consular issues. So for my first assignment, I actually worked in Beijing, China. And prior to Beijing, China, I studied Mandarin at the Foreign Service Institute. Um, I believe I studied for about 7 months before I shipped off to Beijing. And it was a wonderful experience. And so one of the things that I learned being in China for the first time was, when you learn a language, um, you don't actually learn it until you're in country. And so even though I had taken 7 months of Mandarin back in DC in Washington, um, I really hadn't experienced what it was like to be a diplomat in Beijing. And so I think there I was able to actually interact with people, learn colloquialisms, learn aspects of the culture. And it was a very rewarding experience because unlike my other times studying abroad, I was able to actually represent the United States government. And it felt like an honor, to be a first generation American to represent this country that my parents chose to live in. Um, and so I was in Beijing for 2 years, and after Beijing, I went to Tegucigalpa, Honduras, and it was quite a shift to go from Beijing to Tegucigalpa. I went back to the Foreign Service Institute to learn Spanish, and after finishing up with my Spanish studies, I moved to Tegucigalpa, where I also did visa work. And unfortunately, I was only there for 2 months. So after COVID hit, the country shut down, and many diplomats went back to the United States just because we didn't want to um, overrun local health systems. Um, and so I moved back to the US. And when I was there, I actually got the opportunity to become a diplomatic security agent. So um, I am a special agent with the Diplomatic Security Service. And what that really means is I'm a federal agent, otherwise known as police in the United States. And we focus on protecting the Secretary of State as our main protectee, protecting foreign dignitaries that come to the United States, and also investigating visa and passport fraud. And so that opportunity came to me after I had come back to the US, and I took it. And it's been the job that I've been doing for the past 5 or 6 years. And so here at the embassy in Abuja, that is the role that I'm currently in. Um, I work in the regional security office. And so we basically liaise with um, local security partners, whether it's military, DSS, um, Nigerian police force, and we help make sure that our diplomats in country stay safe so that they can continue doing the good work of interacting with local population.
Thank you.
Um,
Thank you. Thank you very much, Catherine. I feel like clapping, but we have to wait till the end of the because I'm so much, the way you narrated the story, it was very smooth, cool, gentle, and I really enjoyed it. And hearing from you really show that the course of study, and that's what I think many of our young people should note, is not a determinant of the fact that you cannot be a diplomat. Um, well, I would like to ask, how many years have you been in country? How many years? And if you could please look at the camera. Yes, yes. So how many
Okay.
years have you been in country?
So I've been in Nigeria for a little over a year. And so I arrived last June.
Wow. That means you must have eaten Nigerian meals. And what's your favorite?
So I've tried many dishes. My favorite is goat pepper soup. I think goat is done very well here. And of course, I grew up eating goat being from Jamaica. They have their own goat recipes, goat soups, but goat pepe soup is I wouldn't admit this to my parents, but it's something that I would prefer over Jamaican cuisine.
That's interesting. What about jollof rice? Because there's a war between Nigeria and Ghana. We're,
I've
we're
heard
still
about
on that
this.
war, whether Nigeria jollof rice is better than that of Ghana. What do you think?
So I've never had Ghanaian jollof rice, but I have had Nigerian, and of course it's very good. So I think it would be safe to say that, Jamaica or Nigeria would win, even without me trying the Ghanaian jollof rice.
That's interesting. Thank you very much. And that's the height of diplomacy. All right. For those who are joining us, thank you very much. I can see quite a number of people in Bauchi, in Calabar, and I can see individuals. Some of them are our alums. They've been invited, and thank you very much for all of you who have joined us today. If you have any question to ask, this is a non-policy discussion program. Please don't ask anything relating to politics, anything relating to policy. Ask about her experience. And so I will quickly ask Bochi, because I've seen your hand up. Bochi, can you please ask your question? Unmute yourself. Um, and let's make sure that we make it brief. Yes, Bochi.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Since Katherine Stewart. My question here is, what's the difference between consulate, embassy, and state department? That is one question. And the other question are, what are the engagement requirements, qualifications, tools, and engagement that can lead us to being a better diplomat or engaging in diplomacy? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So these are good questions. So I'll start with the first. So the Department of State is what the United States would call their equivalent of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And so it's been called that since the founding of the country. And what we call the Department of State. So when we say that, we're really referring to the office, mainly the building that's in Washington, D.C. So the Department of State is where all of our diplomats work out of, right? So it's our headquarters, and it's where the Secretary of State works, and it's where all of American diplomacy and policy comes from. And so whenever we work in an embassy or a consulate overseas, everything originates from the Department of State back in Washington, D.C. So the difference between an embassy and a consulate is they're always overseas, right? And the main difference is the embassy is usually in the capital city of a country, and it is where the US ambassador will sit. If a country does not have a formal ambassador, then they'll have a chargé d'affaires, which is basically someone who sits in while we wait for an ambassador to be confirmed by our Congress. So an embassy and consulate will have very much the same function where they will implement policies from the Department of State back in DC. But the embassy is much more formalized because we have the ambassador, and we also, they tend to be larger. Just because we have so many offices that are centralized in the country, and consulates are there usually to expand our diplomatic operations within large countries. So in a country like Nigeria, it's very telling that we have an embassy in Abuja, the capital city, so that our ambassador can liaise with the head administration, the Tinubu administration. And then we also have a consulate in Lagos, because we have quite a population in Lagos that we'd like to reach out to. There are places like Honduras that only has the embassy, and that is the only place that there is an American seat. And then there are places like China where there are multiple consulates, because we have such a wide audience to connect with. And then your second question, if I remember correctly, it's talking about the qualifications that are required to work in diplomacy. Is that correct?
Correct.
So the United States works a little bit differently from other countries, where it's a little more meritocratic. So any US citizen can apply to be a diplomat, and it's a fairly rigorous process where you basically take a test called the Foreign Service Officer Test. And then you go to the next round if you pass, and where you answer a bunch of questions in the essay form. And these are questions that would determine, how well you articulate yourself, how you solve problems, how you see the world. And if you pass that round, then you would go into an oral assessment. And an oral assessment is basically a culmination of the two, where you have a group exercise, you have a written exercise, and you have a behavioral interview. And this process is standardized so that any American citizen can apply. Of course, before you get there, we do have some specifications where you do have to have a bachelor's degree. So a 4-year college degree is required just to even get to that point. And, that is something that that has been the case for years. But because we allow any sort of college major or minor, you get a wide variety of people coming into the Department of State to work as a diplomat. There are people who were biology majors, who were journalism majors, English majors, anthropology majors like myself. And yeah, there's just a wide variety of things that people can study to become a US diplomat, and we enjoy having all these different perspectives.
Katherine, thank you very, very much.
Mhm.
Sincerely, and I can see Bauchi, showing thumbs up for you. That means the person who asked the question is really satisfied. I'm even more satisfied. Thank you very much. We have a lot of Nigerian youth who are interested in studying in the United States. Would you tell them a little bit about your experience? Because people are looking at studying the USA primarily because US has world class education system, and that's where things are really happening. When you talk about breakthrough in research, that's where it's happening. So what is it like for someone to study in the US? As a student, what was your experience like?
As a student studying in the US, it's hard for me to give a unique perspective, because I grew up in the US, and I went to a US high school that was college preparatory. So I guess to speak on that experience, it's very independent, right? Most universities in the United States, require a lot of discipline and independence to come from the student themselves. From what I've seen with a lot of my international student counterparts, is one of the things that they were very surprised by was the fact that when you study at a university or college in the United States, no one is really going to make sure that you're doing what you need to do. You know, it's all about your personal drive and all about what you want to get out of it. If you want to take classes and get top marks, and then, you know, go on to graduate studies and do research, you are welcome to do that. If you want to go to a university or college just to learn different topics and not necessarily get top marks, you can do that as well within the bounds of the university's own rules in terms of enrollment. But I would say that the biggest thing that people struggle with is the sense of independence. And also, you know, speaking from someone, I studied abroad in the UK, and you know, it is very difficult to be in such a rigorous environment away from friends and family. And I think that's something that a lot of international students struggle with, because especially if your family is over 2,000 miles away or across an entire ocean, if you're having a hard time, which is very common, you know, people are usually in their teens when they start in university, not having your parents around, not having your siblings, friends, it's very difficult to succeed. And so building your own sense of support, your support system is incredibly important, which is why so many universities and colleges have they have groups. So you have an international studies group, you can have a different language group. So my university in Chicago, we actually had quite a few international students, and they would band together in different language groups. So Russian speakers would have a Russian speakers club, French speakers would have a French speaking club. And we had a variety of languages, and that was just so that people can either teach Americans those languages, but also band together to create their own support system.
Time has gone so fast. We've done
Yeah.
20 minutes. I can't believe that. Okay, do we have any question from any of you from Oka, Wino, Calabar, any other person? All right, so while we're waiting, we also would like to ask, how do you, you've talked about discipline, you've talked about, as a diplomat, you have to be meeting with people. What are the skills that someone can actually develop to be able to function in that role? I mean, you are meeting with people from a variety of backgrounds at different levels, and yet you have to still, represent United States very well. So what are those skills? After that question, then I'll go to Calabar and then call Abosede also. Over to you, Katherine.
That's a good question. So being able to speak with people who are not like you is the most important aspect, in my opinion. And so being able to traverse cultural boundaries and accepting things that you might not agree with yourself, but you would still respect on the other side. So being a child of immigrants, I've always felt like I grew up with a little bit of a divide, right? Because I had my Jamaican heritage, and then of course, you know, you have the traditional American heritage. And from when I was young, I spent a lot of time trying to bridge the gap. And both can be true. Like I can be Jamaican, I can be American, and I just need to find a way to connect the two. And I think that experience of connecting those two cultures within my own self, that helped me that helped me with the ability to speak to other people of different cultures. Learning languages is also very important as a diplomat. I love learning languages. And when I was in college, I actually studied Russian and I studied Hindi, neither of which I speak now because I just never practice at it. But it's always that idea that if I go to another country, I can connect with someone and speak their language. I think sometimes Americans, we expect everyone to speak English, even if we travel somewhere else. And I think it puts us at a disadvantage. And so being able to learn languages, being able to cross cultural divides. And I think more importantly, that takes a lot of humility and it takes a lot of vulnerability, because when you're learning about a new culture, when you're in a new country for the first time, you feel sort of like a child where there are things that you don't know, even as an adult. And there are people who are constantly correcting you. Oh, no, you can't do that. Oh, no, that's not appropriate, right? And being able to be vulnerable and also humble is one of the most important things, because people can see when you're trying. They see when you're making an effort, right? And it's about connecting with people. So I value you so much that I would put myself in this position so that I can learn more about you. And I hope that you would do the same for me. And that is essentially what it means to be a diplomat in my eyes.
Thank you very much, Katherine. Okay, we go live to Calabar. Calabar, please, can you unmute yourself?
Good morning. Good
Good
morning.
morning.
My name is Deborah. I'm from Heroes Information Technology. I want to know, at what point of your life did you decide to become a diplomat, and why did you choose that field? Why did you choose to become a diplomat?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the first part of the question?
I want to know, at what point of your life did you decide to become a diplomat, and why did you choose to become a diplomat?
Oh, good question. So my husband at the time was going to be a diplomat, and so he was the one who introduced me to the State Department. And so it was through him where I learned about the different programs of the Department of State and US embassies overseas. I'm no longer with that husband, but we still share that love for being overseas. And we actually have a child together. And so one of the reasons why I continue to be a diplomat is to show my son different cultures. But it was the turning point for me was really in college, when I thought about making a career out of my love for foreign affairs and my love for being overseas. Because you can't study abroad as a career, really. But the foreign service which is what we call our diplomatic service, felt like the closest thing to professional studying abroad.
Okay. Abosede, over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Katherine. It was great hearing you. I'm sorry I can't put on my video where I am now. I must say you're an awesome person. I'm so thrilled by the fact that all the way from US to India to London to to different places, even China, and learning languages at the same time. I would say you are a world citizen if if I want to categorize you. So I want to say well done. And thank you for coming to Nigeria. I am Abosede Yeleye. I actually participated in the Hubert H. Humphrey program, which is a program of the Department of State in the US. And I was in Minnesota. Minnesota are traditionally great hosts. So I enjoyed my stay there, except that I would say that the winter in Minnesota would beat that of Chicago. It was so that was, but what they lost in the winter, in the cold, they made it up in their warmth. They were really nice. Okay, so back to my question, I want to ask you, you know, two questions. The first is more on a personal basis. I'm hearing you. I want to believe that you actually started this work a little bit early. So, what would you say would be your biggest challenge working as a diplomat? Working as a diplomat. Because I know even the ones in, I mean, when people come, before we get to know you well, the next thing is that they have transferred you. Okay, so what is your biggest challenge? That is one. And the second question would be, what is your greatest challenge in working in Nigeria? You've been here for more than a year. What has been your biggest challenge? I would like to know. Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Mhm.
So actually, when you asked the first question, a couple things came to mind. So I'll just say them as they come to me. But one of the things that is definitely a challenge. Remember, I spoke about vulnerability and humbling yourself so that you learn a new culture. Of course, that's not easy, and it's very easy for me to say that now, after having settled in Abuja. But every time I go to a new country, I have what I would call a culture shock, where it takes me several months to get used to living in a certain place. Um, I I am very particular with how I do things, right? So, like driving in Abuja, um, is very different than driving in Atlanta. And so, getting used to the differences was very challenging for me. Also, um, I've mostly served in places that are very far from home. And, you know, I only see my parents maybe once or twice a year if I'm lucky. And so being away from family for such a long time in the service of my country is very difficult. And of course, with Abuja being so far, if I have a family emergency, I usually can't get home at least for 24 hours. And I would say that is a big challenge that I have to contend with in this career. Um, and then your second question, can you remind me? Oh, the biggest challenge of being in Nigeria. Um, so let me give you guys a story about my first impression with Nigeria. So after I arrived on the plane, there's usually someone from the embassy who comes to meet diplomats when they arrive. And for my arrival, I actually did not know who from the embassy was going to come. And I was with my son, and I just traveled for 20 plus hours, and he's very young. And of course, it was just a stressful experience. And then right when we passed immigration, this man picks up my son. I have no idea who this man is, but he picks up my son and throws him in the air, and my son just laughs. Um, and
Wow.
and I thought, you know, that this would never have happened in the US, but it's such a warm welcome that I received. When someone really embraces your child like that. That man happened to be from the embassy. He recognized me even though I didn't know him. But I thought, what a wonderful way to come into this new country. Um, and I have loved the warmth of people here. It's been really nice to be accepted fairly quickly, because it's a lot harder to be accepted in China and Honduras. But here I felt a lot warmer when I came. But I will say very seriously that my biggest challenge living here is a security situation. And so, of course, everyone here has different realities when it comes to the security situation. And um, that's definitely something that I think about very often. right? And, I follow the news, and it is tough to be an effective diplomat knowing that there are significant challenges that affect day-to-day people, myself included. And so I would say that would be my biggest challenge.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Now we have so many hands up. So how are we going to deal with this? Okay, so what we're going to do, Uyo, please go ahead. Unmute yourself. Yes, ask your question, please. All right, so while we're waiting for Uyo, who is Gaisha GML? Unmute yourself. All right, Maiduguri, go ahead with your own question. And please be ready. Maiduguri, unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Sani, and I am a student in the University of Maiduguri. My question is, what advice will you give to someone interested in pursuing a career in international security or diplomacy, especially when it comes to navigating different cultural and geopolitical environments?
I guess the advice that I love to give people is to learn a new language. Most of the people that I know in Nigeria can speak multiple languages already, and I would say continue learning more, learning new languages. I know that, apart from, Hausa, Tiv, Igbo, Yoruba, there are many other languages that are very prevalent, especially with regard to diplomatic relations. So, if someone were to learn French, someone were to learn Mandarin, we do have quite a few French actors here, Chinese actors in terms of diplomacy. And even if you speak 1, 2, 3, 4 languages already, the biggest advice that I tell people is learn more languages, because through people's language, you can learn about their culture, you can learn about their likes and dislikes, and you can learn about international relations, because sometimes language can be very politicized, and learning the intricacies of a political system through the language is one thing that is very helpful for diplomacy in general.
Thank you very much. Let me quickly read the chat before we call on Bliss. I can see from American Center, Abuja, what are some of the challenges in America working in the force as a woman? So that's a question for you. What are challenges as a woman, work-life balance as a woman? Then another person said, that's Georgina, just wants to commend Katherine. She has been excellent in this conversation, pretty and intelligent. Kudos.
Oh, thank you. And I saw that you also have experience at SOAS, Georgina. That's
Yes. Actually, Georgina is a director for the Benin American window. So would you want to answer that question quickly? The issue of being a woman, what are
So, being a woman in the Foreign Service is quite interesting. So, I guess serving overseas, I still have to adhere to certain cultures with regard to women, the differences between men and women and how they're treated in society. But the Department of State does a very good job with making sure that we have equities. And just being a mother, especially a mother of a young child in this field, can be very challenging because, of course, I personally try to balance being a good diplomat and being a good mother. And sometimes, like there are times when I might be having a rough day and I'm not the best diplomat and I'm also not the best mother. Those days where you're just off because something did not go your way or you didn't know something and it just causes frustration. But I think there are enough allies in the Department of State in terms of, I would say the Department of State is very supportive of women, especially women in this career. Before, when the United States was first founded, everyone was male, right? All of the diplomats who served overseas were men. And then slowly women started getting integrated into the diplomatic system. And now we're at the point where we have the highest amount of women, and that's only going to get better, right? The ratio between men and women in the Foreign Service. And of course, when you increase the amount of women, you have to take into consideration the amount of mothers, the amount of daughters who have aging parents, sisters who still have to keep up with their siblings. And so I don't want to discount what a man might be experiencing in the Foreign Service, but just with my personal experience, I have experienced a lot of challenges as a woman and a mother overseas. But it all comes back to humility. I try not to take things personally if there is a cultural tradition that does not see women the same as in the United States. And I try to teach my son this, right? There's some cultural practices that I may not observe in the United States, but being overseas, we don't have to agree with them, but we have to respect them. And so it's just finding that balance between respecting a culture, being humble, understanding that you're not alone, and that progress is working all the time.
Thank you very much. We have Bliss. Please, Bliss, could you just go right ahead, unmute yourself, and ask a question very quickly, straight to the question, please.
Good morning. My name is Bliss. I wanted to ask a question, but you already answered half of it. I wanted to ask you, as a mother and a wife, how are you able to balance your work as a diplomat? That's question one. And question two is, after your college and your university degree, how are you able to navigate and find your way into the embassy, into diplomatic movements?
So thank you for your question. So I'm actually no longer a wife. My former husband and I split up just for personal differences, but we continue to raise our son in the Foreign Service together. So being a single mother, it does have some significant challenges because I have to sort of balance my career with still trying to integrate my son into both families, right? Because I want my son, even though we're in Nigeria now, I want him to remember his Jamaican heritage. And I also want him to remember the heritage from where his father comes from. And so now that we're no longer married, it takes a little more effort for me to make sure that he spends time with different grandparents. And I won't lie, it is very taxing emotionally and physically. Doing this by myself is something that I never really had to do before, but I would not trade this life for another one. And can you remind me of your second question, please?
The second question.
Yes, I think she has answered the second question. Please, let's quickly move on. You have answered the second question because I still have like 7 people who have their hands up. So if you don't mind, let's quickly go to Ibadan. And then Calabar, quickly unmute yourself. And Calabar, please come quickly to the screen. And then Oka, make sure you move quickly to the screen. Okay, Ibadan is not ready. How about Calabar? Oka?
Is here.
Okay. Go right on, Oka. Oka, go ahead. Calabar, you've had a turn before, so let's have another person. Joss, let's go to Joss. So Calabar, go and sit down. Let's have Joss quickly. We're running seriously out of time.
Okay. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning to our resource person today. It's been a wonderful conversation so far. I like to find out about diplomacy for young people. What does it take for a young person? Do you advise a young person to venture into diplomacy? And then how young should someone be, or how old should you be to venture into diplomacy or take a career path in diplomacy? Is there any age restriction, or would you
Okay,
advise that
that's okay.
someone should attain a certain age before considering a path in diplomacy? Yeah, thank
That's
you.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So I have to say that I am not sure of the Nigerian diplomat system and what qualifications and specifications are required, but I can speak to the US side. So for the United States, I believe you have to be at least 21 years old before you can start as a diplomat. And one of the main qualifications is that you have to have a bachelor's degree. And that's just something that's across the board. So anyone can apply. You have to be an American citizen, 21 years old with a bachelor's degree. And after that, anyone can apply. But to speak to your question on how young people should partake in diplomacy, I think that's a wonderful question, right? Because there are many populations that have more young people than older people. And, of course, just speaking on the cliche, young people are the future. And because you are, right? You all, if you are a teenager in the next 10 to 20 years, you are going to be the main drivers of economies, of politics, of social settings. And the big thing is just to make sure that you continue learning. There was a question before where I said learning languages, and while I still believe that, learning new things about other countries, being engaged in your communities, whether it's through politics or whether it's through community service. I strongly believe in serving your community. If you see something that you don't like about your community, being a servant to your people is one of the best ways to start in diplomacy, just because if you start serving your community, you sort of become an ambassador for that community, especially if you want to share your practices with others. If you come across someone else from another state in Nigeria, or even if you come across a foreigner in Nigeria and then working your way out, serving your community is one of the best ways to both start the skills of being a diplomat, but also continuing to learn is something that is very important because, for everyone in the United States Foreign Service, all adults are constantly learning, either learning about new countries, learning new languages, learning how to settle in different environments. And those are the skills that are really necessary to succeed in this career.
Thank you very much. I'm reading from Imaobong Ladipo Sanusi. He wrote, he said, "Thank you for being so real. Good morning."
Good morning.
Iban, are you ready now? Then, guys, sir, are you ready? We're taking both of you quickly. Iban, go ahead.
Okay, thank you for all your insight and advice. I just wanted to ask, you mentioned earlier about creating a community or a support system. So how have you created a support system in the different places that you visited around the world as a diplomat and even just studying there? So how have you created those communities or those support systems even in foreign countries?
Oh, that's a good question. So, just speaking about myself, I actually would consider myself an introvert. And so, after a social gathering or an event, I love to recharge by myself at home, surrounded by books. And it's actually through that where I gained a lot of my friends overseas. And there are just different things that I'm interested in. I love to read, and actually I like to collect books. One of my goals in life is to have my own library, like a home library, and I love to connect with people with books. And I've done that in both Beijing and Tegucigalpa, where I've connected with people just about books and reading. But also I tend to I gravitate towards a lot of Black Americans. Black Americans in the embassy or consulate that I work in. That's just naturally, I find a lot of camaraderie, especially if I find that someone's Jamaican, then we're friends immediately, you know? So just finding people with whom you have similar interests or even similar backgrounds. Usually if there's someone from Atlanta, I will connect with them. If someone likes a particular type of music, so I actually like classical music, and that's something that I connected with people on. And so I really like organic organic events, or I'm sorry, like meeting people organically is what I should say. You just be honest, you be yourself, and people will gravitate towards you based on what you put out there. And so with my particular interests, I've attracted people who also love books, who also might be an introvert, who like to recharge at home, who like to listen to classical music, who are from Atlanta and they like to talk about it. So that's usually how I develop my own system. And then also after becoming a mother, it's very nice to connect with other mothers because we can support each other, right? I can watch someone's kids, someone can watch my son. It's a really great way for me to connect with people and be seen and also be supported.
Interesting. These are nuggets which young people should learn how to create your own support system. If we can create a shot on that, that will go viral. Can be sure it's going to go viral. Guys, can we have you now? And that's the final question.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning to our guest.
Good morning.
My question is that as an international diplomat, how do you adopt with the weather, food, climate change? How do you respect people's values and norms Have you been to different parts of the countries of the world? Thank you very much.
All right, let's go
Hello.
right. Go ahead.
So how I acclimatize myself to different weather, different cultures, different foods. So, coming from Jamaica, that's where I started to learn the differences between, another country and America, right? So when it comes to traveling, I love to integrate myself as much as I can into local culture. And so um I I love to try new foods that I think would agree with me. Um I have an affinity for spicy foods, and so that's why I really love goat pepe soup. Um but I think generally I I found that being in all these different climates has been it hasn't really been that odd, because when I was in Beijing, the winters are very cold, and I'd already lived in Chicago, so I know cold. Being in Nigeria, it was odd for me to have only two seasons, the rainy season and Harmattan, but there's something similar in Jamaica, and so I was used to that too. And then being in Honduras, just another sort of tropical climate. So I think because I had traveled so much and I'd lived in so many different places, um, getting used to the weather was something that um, came fairly easily to me. And also because I am fairly open when it comes to new foods, I also have an easy time integrating myself into different cuisines. Uh, of course, there are things in every country that I don't like, right? Even in America, there are foods that I don't like. And I I always try things at least once. And my father once told me, when you're a child and you're a very picky eater, I was not allowed to be a picky eater. He said, anytime you go into someone's home, you always eat what they prepare for you. Always. Even if it's something that we don't eat here, even if it's something that your mother and I don't cook, you must eat it. And that's the way I see going overseas. If someone prepares something for you when you go overseas, you eat it, even if you don't like it. And you show gratitude that someone cared enough about you to cook for you and share their food with you. Um, so that's really how I've come to just be a good eater, so to speak, when I go to other countries.
Wow. Thank you, thank you, thank you very, very much. I can see from online we have 5 people watching. Demola Adewale Kayode said, thank you, Katherine. Naome Solution said, learning languages is always a good idea wherever you are. Olushola Ogunade said, very impactful and educative. Thanks so much for sharing your experiences. Zakari says, watching from Abuja. So we have, this program has been very impactful. And sincerely, I want to thank you, Katherine, on short notice, for you to have pulled this through. What if we told you last year? What would have happened? I
I
mean,
appreciate everyone. Thank you, everyone, for your very insightful questions. I can tell that you all are interested in foreign affairs and diplomacy, and even aspects of American culture. And so I really appreciate this opportunity to share some part of myself with you all. Sometimes people don't get enough to speak about themselves, and I really appreciate being able to share some of my history with you all.
Thank you very much. Can we put our hands together for Katherine, everybody? Put your hands together. Wow.
Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. So with this, we come to the end of this very insightful session. And once again, Katherine, we're so grateful, and we do not take it for granted. You've left your work and you've come to share your life history with us. And for all of us from different American spaces all over the country, and even the alum, we have the president of the Albert Humphrey Fellowship on this call. We appreciate all of you for the time you spent with us. We really look forward to another opportunity. Let me remind you, every last Thursday of the month is when we have Speak with a Diplomat. Every last Monday is when we have a employability webinar. Every third Friday of the month is where we meet with our alum. And we are having currently every Tuesday for the past 5 weeks. We've been running our MOOC camp at 1:30. Please make sure by next week you are with us so that we can have a final session. Katherine, thank you very much once again. And everyone, thank you. And bye-bye for now. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, sir. Bye, all.